Often as I begin a talk, I like to set the ground of where we're going in this conversation on Sunday morning with some definitions. Well, if we started there with some basic definitions about the message today, these powers of hope and faith, or if we were to begin with some familiar spiritual or scriptural references to faith, or maybe some famous quotes on the topic, what do we have? These two qualities of life, I think of them as our superpowers. Hope and faith have perhaps been seen to be the province of religiosity, that provenance of the church, the formal church. And perhaps in that context, we reduce them, these powerful words, to the realm of rote understanding and common usage. We bring them out on Sundays like the white gloves and the fancy hat of going to church of my mother's generation. But I'm inviting us to take off those gloves, roll up our sleeves, and get down to some practical work in the use of faith and hope as the foundation of our life. Not just a Sunday understanding, not just using the terms as some remote concepts trapped in this season of Advent or in Sunday sermons. We look at hope and faith today as tools for living our life, embedded in the activity of our mind that moves all of our thought, word, and action, those creative processes of life. Let's give hope and faith entry to our everyday. But back to the basics, which can give us some language that we can use in consideration of this topic. Basics give us the ignition of the concepts. Basics give us the movement to our illumination. So the basics I begin with in unity, a metaphysical approach to the spiritual life, meaning that which is beyond the physical realm, that which we can see, touch, and feel. We seek to understand beyond this life experience, because there's the energy of the universe that we can tap into. According to our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, hope is the expectation of good in the future. It is subject to time. Faith is the certain knowledge that our good is ours right now. Faith goes beyond time and space, because faith is the presence of God. Faith is the energy of God active in our mind and in our life. Now, hope applies to what has our attention in our life, the circumstances right here and now in this human experience. It may throw itself forward when we think about the future, whether positively or negatively. When we imagine our future concerns or our future goals, we may hope for that which we do not yet see. Faith is the activity of God and sees beyond our experience, those conditions in our life, to the potential of what already exists in the imagined divine realm, what in unity we often call the mind of God. Now there's the clue. Psst, psst, listen. Everything we experience in our life, everything we create, everything we manifest, begins in that imagined divine realm. That's why Spirit and Scripture calls us to know that we are created in that imagination of God, in that image and likeness and power to live knowing that we reach beyond what we see right in front of us. There is no place to go to find more faith. No exercise to expand your capacity to live in faith. Faith is intrinsic in each of us. We came with a full supply. You are faith-filled by nature, by divine design. Now, what do you do with that faith? That's sort of the rub of life. Often I hear the comment, or I've been known to think it myself, if only I had the faith of fill in the blank. If I had the faith, I would demonstrate, I would manifest, I would envision and create the life that I hold in my dreams. If only I had the faith of a respected minister, or the faith of a teacher, or a great healer, a spiritual author, or a mystic that has been a light in my life. If I had the faith of Jesus, there's the one that we get off the hook with, or any other great master. If I had the faith of Jesus, well, let's let go of that trap today. We do have that same faith in our hearts and minds that we observe and identify and recognize in some respected minister, some great teacher, some healer or mystic, some Jesus or other master. We have that within us because faith is part of our being. God is no more centered in any great mind that you can think of than God is centered in you. God exists nowhere greater in anyone else than God exists in you. Let's claim that. God exists nowhere in any great mind greater than in me. I have the same depth of faith that Jesus lived and demonstrated. Breathe into that for just a moment, because it's obvious when we look around and we observe that there may be a great difference between the developed consciousness of a teacher, a mystic, a Jesus, and you and me. We might be able to observe that we do not live in that activity of God as readily as someone else in any given moment. The question is not whether God is centered in you, because that's a definite thing. It's already established. You can take God centered in you to the bank for this next week and for the future. Here's the question to ponder. Am I? Are you? Are we all centered in God? God is centered in me, and I am centered in God. That's how we anchor the full measure of faith in our everyday life. We get absorbed in the details of life. We can be more centered in our human experience, in the things that attract us, the people who are part of our experience, situations, all that stuff that populates our daily landscape. We live in the attachment to the stuff of life. That's often where our focus is centered. We may place our faith in our worries, our doubts, and our fears, our concerns. What if we shifted that attachment, that awareness, that centered in feeling? What if that were wholly and completely in the activity of God? Whole, holy, holistically centered in God. That's the key to understanding that you possess the activity, the essence of faith. Belief in God as the center of living, permeating all things, binding all things, is the essence of my consciousness and your consciousness. Again, in that process of consciousness of life, where is your awareness of God? Sometimes it's a challenge to see ourselves from this perspective that God is in us, as us, through us, for us, as Cindy spoke that word, that phrase. stuck in my mind this morning. I had a little boom, because I like to say that God is the conspiracy of love working for our good in every way. God is indeed for us in every moment, always and always. The call is to let go of the challenge to resonate with that presence of God. Mentors who I have had great respect and affection for have been those people giving me the gift to lift my vision of myself to some place that I did not see without the gift of their reflection of who I could be. Mentors often, and teachers and masters often give us that gift of seeing more in ourselves through their eyes than we can see on our own or at the beginning. One of the exercises contained in the Q process workshop, which we've done multiple times over the past year and will come around another opportunity in mid-January, beginning in mid-January with Reverend Denise, is to choose 3 icons from your life experience, living or passed on to spirit, real or fictional, whatever are those individuals that you hold in admiration. And what are the qualities that garner, that call you to your regard and respect for those individuals? Identify those qualities in others, because it's easy to spot it out there. It's easy to be objective about others we're noticing or observing. But the things that we recognize in others, it is said, are the qualities that we possess, because we can only see them in others as a reflection of our true self. Maybe we recognize those qualities, and maybe we notice them because it's our soul calling us to lift ourselves into that self-recognition of what is holy and what is valuable in us, that is always present, and we've simply hidden perhaps behind a veil. A number of years ago, in the home I shared with my husband in Bremerton, Washington, our life was centered around entertaining our friends, gathering our friends in great joy. And I was all about setting the environment for that. A little bit of drama production in my background, and it extended to the set I created in my home. Maybe it was just an intimate dinner with my husband, kind of a rare occasion to have a little romantic ambience for a quiet dinner at home with the two of us. Maybe it was mood for an evening in music and a lively sing-along when our dear friend and pianist, composer, entertainer, and the music director at the church there would come to our home, and all the friends would gather, and we'd have a lively, festive evening around the piano. Or maybe it was creating the energy for a meal with a table full of friends where the spirited discussion lasted way beyond the consumption of food. And we'd finally get up hours later because we needed to move the okole to give it a little break. I love to create the lighting in the space that supported whatever was going on. So when I moved into this house, I changed all the light switches in the rooms where we gathered to those dimmer slider switches, rheostats. And I could turn up or turn down the light in the room so that I set the mood that I wanted. I wanted to manage the light at my fingertips. I wanted to move the power in the space to suit what was happening at that moment. Well, if we think of our faith as a rheostat, we can, at the tip of our fingers, move that energy in our life into the space that supports the most positive experience we're having. All the faith we could ever need, all the faith we will ever have, is already in the midst of us. We hold it in our mind and our heart as a vibration in our very being just like electricity, waiting at that switch to come into the experience of lighting the space when we throw the switch or move the slider. That's an apt analogy for faith within us. We are already fully stocked. There is no shortage in our experience. There is only throwing the switch to fully turn on the power at the full light setting at that rheostat, and then focus our faith in the direction of our hope and our belief. So whether it's a switch or a dimmer, your rheostat in life is how you access that power of faith. No need to go looking outside. No need even to read more scripture, more teachers, more anything. Simply center in the knowledge that God is in you and you are in God, and you access the full power right behind that switch and slide it up full. So whether we're talking about electricity or faith, we are talking about the operation of laws of the universe, a physical law that governs electricity, and a spiritual law, the spiritual law of life that governs faith. Both are to be counted on. We know that when we throw that light switch or slide up that dimmer and contact is made in the circuit, we know the electricity must flow to illuminate that bulb. When we throw the switch of faith into full power mode, the universe must flow. It doesn't say may flow. It's not if it feels like it on that moment, not if we've been good girls and boys. No. When we turn the power on, faith must flow. It must make contact between our mind and the mind of God, and it must allow that natural flow of God's energy that is always present. Always. Always present. Allow your faith to be that positive charged particle, not the negative. Attach your faith to the good, the positive, the uplifting, the light. Attach your faith to God, fully centered in you, and you fully centered in God. The presence of hope, that power, tends to be emotionally based within us. Belief is a mental and intellectual process. But faith is a spiritual activity. This is like a spectrum. And in this faith spectrum, this continuum, we move from the feeling of our desire, that hope, to the creative thought of our desire, belief, to that urging, quiet confidence that all is possible in the realm of God. Breathe into that. All is possible in the realm of God, that we are that potential of every good thing in God expressed through our consciousness. We reflect that image and likeness of what God sees in us, what God imagines in divine mind as our being. Our faith is the rheostat of our consciousness that moves the possibility of hope to potentiality of belief to the reality of faith. This is spoken about in Scripture in Hebrews 11:1. Hebrews, sometimes scholars attribute it generally to Paul, but they also sort of have a little caveat there. But it's Hebrews, the book in the New Testament, in the Christian scriptures, is this grand statement about faith, anchored in the presence of God. So important is this message in this chapter that this is the first verse that it begins with. Now, faith. Faith is the certainty of the things hoped for, a proof of things not seen. The certainty. Now, I like when I'm doing my Bible research to compare the language of various translations. And from either Greek or Hebrew to English translations, that term certainty is also translated as assurance. That which we can count on. And the proof of things sometimes is transcribed, the transcription is to the evidence of things not seen. We talked about that metaphysical aspect of life of seeing past the stuff in front of us into that space that is the divine realm, which maybe we do not see with our human eyes, but we are called into the power, that superpower of faith, to have a vision that knows the truth and holds its own proof, understands the evidence is found in the realm of the divine presence of God. So here we are. Put those rheostats on high power, and then what? Emmett Fox was a metaphysical teacher and minister about the mid-1900s, arose to prominence in the Depression in the early 1900s, and he identified what he called as the golden key to life. Summed up easily, it's this. Don't think about that problem. Think about God. Don't worry about the stuff that's right in front of you right now, because that's faith at the low setting. But raise your vision to that space beyond what looks present in front of you and seek the evidence in the mind of God. Seek the evidence of your own faith, that deeper and broader and grander truth that exists when we can look right through what's in front of us to see something unexpected beyond. Like those images that are all pixelated color, but there's one thing at the surface image, and when you relax your vision, something completely different pops up for you to see, to recognize, to claim. That's like the power of faith. Relaxing our attention that's on all the stuff that's going on around us and in front of us and captures our daily attention. Whew. Relax. Relax the mind. Relax the vision. Relax into the space of God so that you can see the true image of your own life. So what do we do about that when we've got our rheostats up? What if we're faced with an illness? Emmett Fox would say, don't focus on the fear of the diagnosis or the prognosis. Those are facts. That's the stuff right in front of you. Focus on the ever-present activity of God on the other side of that information. The ever-present activity of God that's embedded in every cell retains the imprint of perfect health and wholeness. You want to focus there to reactivate that energy from which you have the capacity to aid in your own healing, to allow the energy of God in cooperation with whatever practical work and treatment you are called to do. Let that energy of each cell's wholeness be reignited when you don't get trapped at the level that's right here, but you are able to move beyond into the mind of God, into that image behind what's in front. Are you facing a challenge of income this year? Certainly many of us are. But don't focus on the emptiness of your bank account. Focus instead on the spiritual principle that there is more than enough in God, in you, that inspires an abundance of creative ideas to shift this temporary circumstance into the unlimited opulence of the energy of God. Are you frustrated with the restrictions of living in a pandemic? I could be ready to be done with this, but let's not focus on what we cannot do. Let's appreciate the compassion and respect for others that we see demonstrated as we practice safe distance, washing our hands religiously, and wearing of masks. Let's not be saddened that we did not have the opportunity to gather for Thanksgiving as we might usually, or that we're looking ahead to the next holidays, this coming holy season, with the same restriction. Instead, let's give thanks for the ways technology has moved to support our availability to stay connected. The things that have blossomed in this last 10 months that still allow for an intimate, connected interaction with one another, whether it's with community or being connected heart to heart with your family or friends across miles or even across an ocean. In the oneness of God, we are always sitting down to the feast at the table of life, and we are always connected to one another in the oneness and the presence and the activity and the power of God. So here's a thought to ponder at the advent of this holy season, marked by the beginning of this first Sunday. Advent, that word means arrival. And in the Christian community specifically, it means the coming of the Christ. Arrival, that which is surfacing, the emergence of the Christ presenced and the Christ-powered faith that moves you into a life of purpose, a life of wholeness. What Christ-presenced and Christ-powered energy is adventing in you right now. You are emerging in a faith power that rises from God awareness in you. You are centered in God, and you are knowing fully that God is centered in you. Joyfully, in hope and faith, we are each the arriving, emerging Christ presence. Blessings. Aloha.